I'm Alejandro with Kleinn Automotive Accessories, and today we're going to install the GMHD20 kit. Before we put it on the vehicle, we need to do some assembly on the bench. Let's get to it. So with our tank brackets, all we're going to do here to prep it for installation is take this U-channel and I'm going to run it along the spine of the bracket arms. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And that is it with this bracket. We'll move on to the horns now. Now with the horns, what we are going to do first is cut to the tubing right down the middle because we are not going to use these. And I'm removing the excess tubing. I'm going to remove the trumpets. So we'll remove this trumpet and we're going to have to swap them. The best way to do that is with heat. Applying heat directly along this seam, favoring that side. Just a little bit. We'll do the same thing to the smallest trumpet. Now I'm going to go ahead and separate these horns. This white shipping cap can be discarded. We're saving the hardware. First thing we're going to do is remove the excess tubing that we no longer need, that we cut. When we're installing the solenoid, we want to make sure the arrow is going into the horn driver. We're going to use some juice. And it will be like that with the post facing upwards. What we can do now is we're going to pull off that connector and set it aside so we can reinstall it later once it's wired up. To remove it, there's a screw in the center. You just unscrew and then you can pry the connector off, and we're going to set that aside. Now we can install our last fitting that's going to interface to the tank. I'm just snugging it up so it sits nicely and the threads fully engage. So for the next step, we're going to take our horn driver with the solenoid and we're going to attach it to our smallest bracket for the horns. We actually are going to use our scaled drawing that comes included with the install guide. This just allows for easy identification of hardware components. That way it takes the guessing out of it. The hardware we are focusing on specifically is hardware H12, which are the metric bolts that are going to be used to fasten these horns with our retained horn hardware. We also have a note here that they are very similar to the H9s. What we have to do is we're going to check the threads before we install them. So we have 4 here, they match both. We're just going to check some threads. So that one fits. We have that as an H12. This one is good, also as an H12. This one seizes up, which means it's a different thread pitch, as does this one. So we're going to be focusing on those two because those are the ones we need to install it. We're going to install the bolt, and then on the underside is going to be our retained hardware, which is going to be a flat washer, a lock washer, and then one of our H12 nuts. When we're installing these, we're just going to leave them finger tight because we want to have some adjustability in the horn when we're installing it onto the vehicle. Now we can go ahead and proceed with the other horn brackets being installed. So now we can install the remaining horn drivers to their respective brackets. I went ahead and removed the large horn trumpet just to make it easier to install. We're going to use the same system and the same configuration. The horn is going to go in that slot, and then our flat washer, our lock washer, and then one of the H12 nuts. We'll go ahead and do the same thing for the remaining horns. Again, we just want that little bit of adjustability. Next thing we're going to do is take our 3/8 inch air tubing and we're going to find a midway point and we have to cut it. And now we have 2 separate pieces. When we're installing these, we're going to take our collar and slide it over it. To make this process easier, we're going to use a heat gun to soften the plastic a little bit, and that way we're not fighting with it so much. When I'm tightening this down, I'm going to make sure it goes all the way to the edge, and you'll feel that positive stop once you get there. Now we'll go ahead and do it on the other side. We are going to be installing all the fittings that come with our kit. First thing we have to do is just go ahead and remove all our red shipping plugs to expose the threads. These can be discarded because they will not be used again. We're going to start with our drain, which goes on this single port. I'm going to begin by installing some of our thread sealant. We want to make sure it doesn't get into the opening and closing portion of this drain. Keep it off of that. We're just gonna get it finger tight and then another 1/4 to a 1/2 turn and it's good. Now we'll focus on the front. We're gonna do our pressure relief valve and it's going to be the same process. This is our 1/4 inch NPT elbow fitting. This one actually mates to the pressure switch and the orientation of this one is going to be upwards. While we're here, we'll go ahead and install our pressure switch. We want to take care not to plug that hole with our juice. We need to keep it clear so that it can function properly. Again, just a 1/4 to a 1/2 turn. Let's go ahead and install the included crimp terminals so that this is pre-wired and ready to be interfaced to when the time comes. After I crimp these, I just give them a tug to make sure that they are securely installed. Next one here is going to be one of our airline fittings, and the orientation of this one is also important. We also want that one pointing up. These are unused, so we're going to use 2 plugs. With our kits, we give you 2 packs of thread sealant, so you don't have to worry about not having enough. Now we can switch over to the other side. We got one more port that is unused, so we're gonna also use an NPT plug for that. This next one uses our F7 fitting, and the orientation of this one is also going to be straight up, just like that. Right about there. And then this one is our last fitting. It actually comes from our 1302 kit. That's the fitting we're after. It's going to be a straight fitting going in through there. For the compressor, all we're going to do here is install a fitting directly onto our check valve. This is the last fitting in our kit that doesn't involve the INF1. It's going to go straight on there with some of our thread sealant. So this one is important, you don't over tighten it. I wouldn't do more than a 1/2 turn, and that's plenty. That way we don't damage our check valve. So inside of our inflator, what we're going to do is install the correct fittings we need to make this functional. We're not going to worry about our thread tape because we have liquid thread sealant. That is much better. That's going to be our setup. This quick disconnect is actually going to be part of our 1302 kit when we use to have our onboard air through this hose to air up tires. So just like before, we're going to seal that with our liquid thread sealant and give it a 1/4 to a 1/2 turn. And that one's done. We don't have to worry about anything here. Both of those fittings are connected. Now we can work on assembly of our 1302 kit. This is the typical layout of our 1302 bracket. This allows you to mount it somewhere on the vehicle to have access to your air system. This is the last fitting we have that is associated with this kit. So what I am going to do is I'm going to install my thread sealant on those 2 once it's assembled. You have to do this after this kit is on the bracket, otherwise it can't be assembled properly. The orientation of this doesn't matter because this bulkhead fitting can rotate any which way we need it to. So for right now, I'm just going to push our dust cap right up against that wall, and then I can apply our liquid thread sealant. Just tighten that up. So we're all set. We'll set this aside and save it for later. For installing the horn bracket on the driver's side, we are going to remove these 2 bolts. And then we're gonna put a bracket in between that piece of frame and this structural piece here. And we'll be doing the same thing on the back side in a different step. Now we're gonna take 1/2 of our horn bracket, line up the slots, and then we are going to loosely reinstall these 2 bolts because we are going to position the horn in one of our final steps before tightening everything up. Our bracket is still able to be moved and adjusted. Once that's done, we're going to switch over to the back side and install the next bracket that actually contains the base of the horn we're going to be using. So for the rear bracket, we're going to perform the same operation with these 2 bolts. And now we can take our bracket with the horn driver and we're going to do the same thing. I have them in place started. Now I'm just gonna tighten them up really close to being so that their position can be accurate. Now what we're going to do is temporarily hold that bracket in place with one of our hardware pieces. These are square neck carriage bolts. And now while everything's temporarily in place, I can get my medium trumpet, give myself some room, and we're gonna install it. I just want to position my trumpet so that when everything's mounted, it's not going to rattle or hit any metal parts of the frame. Now I could go in here and fully tighten the hardware on the horn. The process for installing the large horn on the other side is exactly the same. We're just going to loosen the front ones and remove the bolts, set them aside, and then we can slide the bracket right in between. The bracket that gets installed is the one without the horn base on there. Now we're just gonna loosely reinstall these bolts back into place. So we leave them loose because they have some adjustability when we install the horn. Now let's get the rear bolts removed. The bracket that goes on here is the one with the base of the horn. So because that is a bit of an awkward angle for me, I'm gonna first temporarily secure those two brackets together. Same way we did on the other side. We got that loosely installed. Now what we're going to do is install the large trumpet onto that horn base. Everything has to be loose until this point because we have to have the ability to adjust the direction of the trumpet so that it doesn't hit any of the body panels. So we have a potential contact point there we want to avoid. There's another one right up here. I'm just gonna slide it back a little bit, actually all the way. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fully tighten those bolts for the horn. Now we're gonna fully tighten the remaining bolts that we had loosened. I'll start with the front to make sure the alignment's still good. So now we can move on to installing the third horn, which goes kind of towards the rear and the center of the vehicle. Okay, to install the smallest horn with its bracket, we're going to be using these 3 studs that are already present on the vehicle. We are not going to undo the flanged nuts that they have on there. We're going to actually put the bracket directly over it. It is worth noting that you want to make sure, because we have the tubing installed, that the exhaust is not hot, because the tubing will come into contact with the exhaust and it can melt the tubing before you get a chance to actually plumb it, which we do not want. So I'm just going to take the bracket assembly and I'm going to move it into position and drop it over the studs. Now that we have it in position, we include these nylon lock nuts that are going to be used to secure them in place. I have my position of this bracket there. So I'm going to take a Sharpie and just mark some reference lines of the position of the horn base, because we'll remove this and fully tighten it and then reinstall it. So here I have my reference marks. We're just going to make sure that the horn is in those bounding box. Okay, we're all set. Now we can final install this on the vehicle. So with our horn driver fully tightened, I'm just going to reinstall the bracket and we can secure it with our nylon lock nuts. Okay, now it's fully installed. So we're going to route this tubing over to the passenger side horn. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this opening with tape just to keep any debris out of it. And we want to make sure our airline is clear so that we don't have any clogs. So I'm going to route it over the exhaust and over the frame, and then we'll come back down on the other side here. And we're going to connect it there. You can see all the debris. We don't want a chance of any of that getting into our air tubing. So I have here about the length I need. I'm going to give myself a little bit more. So I'm going to cut it right here, make sure it's clean. And we want to make this cut straight. We want it to be perpendicular to the tubing because it won't seat properly otherwise. We're just going to go ahead and lock it into position. And we're done with that side. We can do the driver's side horn now. Now, to install the tubing on the other side, we're just gonna follow the same process, and I'm just gonna cover the end to keep any debris from falling into the tube. Now, I'm gonna fish this above the gas tank, over the frame, and back down to the horn. So, we'll cut it right there, nice and straight, and then we will install it. Okay. And it's installed. What we're going to do is detach this module from the frame and remove the frame nuts that are in its position. We're just gonna pull this tab down, press down, and we can remove the connector pin. Get it out of the way just so I have access to the bolt without damaging anything. And there's one more bolt on the top side. Now we're gonna remove these. Now we're gonna remove the bolt that's inside of this hole. And then because we have this module, we're gonna use our included module bracket that's going to be attached later on. Now we can install our compressor bracket and the module bracket on top of it. We're gonna use our included hardware. So we got our compressor bolt located. I'm just gonna tighten it up a little bit to have some play there. While we're here, I'm going to reconnect this plug. We're gonna remove this post to install it onto that bracket once this is in position. So we're gonna keep this pivoted down, and we're going to loosen and remove the other bolt that's inside of there. And with the same process, we're gonna make sure that our position is good with the bracket is resting on the cutouts, and then we'll fully tighten these two. We'll detach this and we'll install our module on the shelf. I'm just going to clip this retaining tab to loosen my connector. Now I'm going to go ahead and raise the module up and install it with our hardware. Now pay attention, this one's a little different. We have our socket head cap screw, and then we have a flat washer, and then it goes through the bracket, and then the module, we're going to take another flat washer and sandwich it. Then we could put a lock washer, drop it, and we can tighten it all with a lock nut. And you want to make sure that these bolts are going up because our compressor is going to be here and we don't want him to hit it. We're just going to go ahead and tighten these so that there's no movement. So now we're going to install our compressor into the vehicle, and I'm going to remove those zip ties so we have access to the leader hose. So before I install this, I'm going to install the air filter that comes with our compressor. I'm going to remove the gray panel casing from our filter because we are not going to be using it. Now we can go up to the compressor, remove our protective valve port, snug it up. It doesn't need to be too tight. Now we're going to install the hardware that's included with the compressor box, and we're going to be feeding them up into the compressor. We'll get our alignment correct, and then we're going to put a flat washer and then a lock washer and then our nut. And I'm going to push it back just a little bit to make sure we have room for a filter should we ever need to change it in the future. Go ahead and fully tighten it. So for installing the tank bracket, we're gonna have to remove this connector, and we gotta get it out of the way. I'm just gonna use a pry tool for half of it. There we go. There's some rocks there. We're just gonna clean that up. Now we are going to perform the same task, removing those bolts from the inside of that frame. And now we do these one at a time so as not to loosen the entire cross member and move its position unintentionally. Now we can come in with our bracket, and we see that is going to fit in one of those two slots. We're just going to take our bracket and another one of our hardware, put it in position. We're going to snug that up, but we still need our bracket to be able to pivot. That's a little too tight. So loosen it up some. That's good. Now our bracket can pivot freely. So we're going to go ahead and remove the bolt that is in this second hole. Now we'll pivot our bracket up, and this wire harness is in the way. We're going to detach that little bit of it as well. Okay. Just got to try to find our hole on the other side. Once that bracket is installed, we can install our tank using the tank straps and the supporting hardware. So now that we have installed a tank bracket, this particular model vehicle has power steps. Those have been actuated down. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our tank straps. But before we do that, let's strap the hardware to the bolt, lock washer, a washer, and then we're going to install them on the upper welded point. We're going to leave them loose because we want our tank to be able to slip in under these brackets, and then we'll clamp them closed. We're not going to tighten them down all the way, maybe about halfway. Depending on how we put in our tank, we may need to undo these. So I am going to install this tank a little forward so that our drain is not interfering with that. Now we'll be able to loosen it without any issues. So now we can just take our bottom socket head cap screw with our locking hardware, and we will install this tank and clamp it down. Lastly, we want to make sure our drain is directly horizontal to the ground so that it actually drains properly when we have to do tank maintenance. Our tank is not going anywhere. So for the 1302 kit, you can use any available holes, mounting it whatever preference you have. Our customer wants it to not drop lower than the rear bumper, so we're gonna put it right here. I'm just gonna take my marker and mark the holes I need so that I can modify this little bracket and install it for him the way he wants it done. I'm gonna start with just a pilot hole, and then I'll go to the actual drill bit size we need. Now we're going to use the hardware that's included with our 1302 kit and just install it. I'm going to put my flat washer on the back side, and then we're just going to use the nut and get it in position. And then we'll get our other bolt. Now we'll put that washer on the back and our nut. And now we'll just get a combination wrench on there and finish installing it. So now we have this installed fully. We're just going to position our fitting so that it runs the tubing in a favorable direction, that we don't have to fight so much. So I think I'm just gonna have it go straight forward. I just want to snug it up so that it doesn't move. Now I'm going to just reorient this cap so that it's in a position that makes sense for operation. And now we'll go ahead and install our air tubing, and this will be running along the frame rail directly to the air tank. First thing we're going to do is remove the cap that attaches the hose. We're going to slide it over our tubing, and we're going to heat it up so that we don't have to struggle working with it. That's good enough. And when I'm tightening this, I'm going to tighten it all the way till it bottoms out on the threads, which is right there. Now we'll take this and we'll run it towards the front of the vehicle directly into the tank. So now we're going to estimate our length for our tubing, probably right around there. I'm going to go ahead and cut that. I can remove our cap, install it, and now we're going to heat up the end of the tubing so that it's pliable. And we fully secure this nut till it bottoms out there. Now we'll go and install our tubing for the air horns. With the same process, we are just going to install the 1/2-inch air tubing that comes in your horn box on our horn driver. We just want it to be pliable. Now that our tubing is installed, I'm going to go ahead and install our last trumpet. Okay, now we can route our tubing to the tank. As before, we keep our air tubing clean because we don't want to introduce particles on our air system. Now we can go ahead and route this over to the tank. Now I can cut it there. All right, Now this one goes to the compressor, and that's what we'll do next. Just as before, we are going to install our compressor tubing with the heat gun. You should be a pro at this by now. I know I am. Should be good. I have already ran my fiberglass rods through a cross member to install the tubing. I am just going to stretch it out so that we kind of don't risk bending it. And we are going to go ahead and tape that. This one is just going to run straight through the cross member. Now I'm going to run my tubing up above the tank and make sure it sits above the pressure switch, and it does. I'm going to measure it for a rough idea, just about there, and I can cut this. Now we will install our air tubing through the cap. Now we're going to wire up the pressure switch. I'm just going to reach up here, grab the wires, just so we have access to them. We're going to use our 2 yellow wires. I'm just going to strip it a little long because the crimp we use is for a larger gauge wire than what our yellow wires are. I'm going to twist it, and then I'm going to double it over to give myself a little bit of that extra. And then I can install it in the connector, make sure it's seated fully. Crimp it, and we're going to give it a tug, and that works. We'll do the same thing with the other wire. Now with that done, I'm going to do a continuity check to make sure that my connections are good. So here we're just going to use a multimeter. I'm going to set it on resistance, and I am going to just check the connections on my pressure switch by finding the wire ends. I'm going to strip them a little bit. And now we can check. So we have our continuity there, which means we have good connections, and we can proceed with putting this in loom before we feed it through the rest of the vehicle. Okay, so I am just going to install our split loom over our connectors. I'm gonna tape that right up there so the loom doesn't come undone, and then I'll just continue feeding this wire through the loom. Then we can use our fiberglass rod and run it back through to the other side so this wire can meet up with the compressor. I got this loomed up. I'm just going to tape the edge off so that I don't lose track of my wires. Then I'm just going to take the end of the loom, secure it to my fiberglass rod, and then we're going to route the wiring up around the tank. I'm going to just secure it with a zip tie to our existing air tubing. I'm going to go ahead and trim that. And now I'm just going to feed the split loom to the other side. That's it. So while we're here with all our wires in this general area, first thing I'm going to do is try to find a spot to ground this compressor to. I'm going to see how much wire I have to work with. Looking around, I think there's a hole right here that is going to be the best option for me. It's too small as it is, so we're going to have to modify it. What I am going to do is I'm going to drill it out a little bit to expose the bare metal, and then I'm going to tap it so that I can screw directly into it. Then I will run this power wire inside the compressor bracket and attach it right in there. I have a very special drill bit that is sized to allow for a tap to go in there and cut it, so I am going to do that. Now, I'm just going to make a quick continuity check to make sure that that is a good point for an electrical ground. So now that I've drilled it out, the metal is exposed. I'm just going to touch that there, and I'm going to look for another exposed metal part of the vehicle to see what our electrical continuity will be. We need to find a spot that has low resistance because we don't want to cause a problem with the system when it's running. We're going to try it, and then we'll be able to check to see how it performs later. When using a tap, you want to go slow, and you want to back off the threads anywhere between a quarter turn and a full turn to break away the metal that's piling up as the threads are being cut. So here we're through, Now this was threaded with a 5/16 and it threads just fine. So now I'm gonna go ahead and run my negative cable from the compressor behind the bracket just to keep it out of the way. And I'm gonna use a lock washer and a flat washer. And this, unfortunately, is too tall here. Let's try it from the bottom side. I wanna make sure this doesn't stick up too much. I may need to get a shorter bolt. For now, that's what we'll use. So it's cleared, doesn't seem to be any issues there. Let's go ahead and tighten it. And that is our grounded compressor wire. I'll go in with a zip tie and tighten that up so that it's not hanging low. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is interface our compressor power wire. Typically, I'd start from the battery and work our way back, but because we have our pressure switch wires here, we're gonna connect the wires and we're gonna run it inside the loom, and then we'll fish everything up into the engine compartment. So using our included connector pack, I'm gonna find a connector that actually mates to that. It's gotta be a yellow one because we're using 10 gauge wire, and it needs to be a male spade, which I see it right there. So that's gonna fit inside of our connector, and we're gonna take our non-fused end of the wire and we're just gonna go in and strip it. This is 10 gauge, so we're gonna use our 10 gauge channel on our wire strippers. I'm just gonna tighten those up, remove that, crimp it, and give it a tug just for good measure. We're gonna make sure our crimp connection is good electrically. I put it on its resistance mode. Just gonna touch those two, and that's a perfect connection. So now I will just go ahead, I'm going to install that. I'm going to wrap it in a little bit of electrical tape, and then I'm gonna feed all of this through the loom. So I have my power wire loomed in. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to snake it behind this body mount, and then we're gonna follow the loom up, and then we will bring this wiring harness into the engine compartment. And we're just going to be zip tying as we move this along. So I think there's a direct line up along the loom into the engine bay, straight up through there. All right, we have it up into the engine compartment, and now we'll lower the vehicle and we'll pull it up. So now we're gonna assemble the connector for the horn solenoid. First thing we have to do is just disassemble this to get access to the internal terminals. So here we have 3 terminals. We're actually only going to be using this one and that one. This one is not used. So there and there. The wires we're going to use are these two, the purple and the black wire that's going to be for the ground. I'm going to give myself a little bit of wire to work with, and we're going to go ahead and feed the wires into the connector housing. Once they're fed inside, we can just strip the wires a little bit to expose the copper. I'm going to give them a twist. And then we're going to use a number 1 Phillips to loosen the terminals on the ends, not the center terminal. Those two. And it doesn't matter which wire goes to which terminal. They're interchangeable. I'm just going to feed the wire in and tighten it into position. And we'll flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Make sure they're nice and secure. Now we can bring it back, and we're gonna leave this loose until we get onto the solenoid, because the solenoid is gonna determine which way we have this housing. So let's move over to the vehicle and get that done. So on our connector, we're using those 2 pins for our wires, and that one is unused. We're gonna orient it to the way the connectors need to be. Now this is where we can adjust the position of the housing. So in this case, I'm actually going to bring it down. We're just gonna make sure we're not pinching any of our wiring when it's getting in position. So now that I know the orientation, I'm gonna remove it. We can install our connector. We're gonna screw it in place so that it doesn't come undone. Now I can go ahead and I could get my loom to loom this, but first I'm going to find a good grounding spot for my ground wire, because that doesn't need to be in the loom. So I have my multimeter here. I'm checking for a good connection. We're going to use the exhaust here as our reference grounding point. so we can see that when we put our probes to it, we have a good electrical connection. So I'm just gonna poke around for, okay, so that's actually our mounting bolt for the bracket itself, and that's got really good continuity. I think I'm gonna go ahead and use that one. So I'm gonna install a ring terminal on our black wire. I'll undo this nut, slide it in place, and lock it back, and we should be good. I'm gonna ground it to this bolt. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take my negative wire, get it with a little bit of extra. We'll trim that and install a crimp ring terminal on. Give it a tug to make sure it's good. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and loosen, run that into position, and we'll go ahead and reattach our nylon lock nut. That should be good there. And now what I'll do is I'll get my loom and I'll start looming our purple wire, which is gonna be the signal wire for the horn button. Let me get it started. I'm gonna fish it in there into the connector, and then we're just gonna seal it up with a little bit of electrical tape so it doesn't come undone. This is just to hold the loom to the connector, and I'll finish looming it and then we can run our wire. Now, using my fiberglass rod, I'm just gonna channel this wire and the loom over the gas tank as we get it ready to where it needs to go into the cabin. I'm just gonna secure it to there for good measure so we don't have anything really loose and flopping around. Now that I got it on the outside frame rail, I'm just going to run it down the length of it until we get to our fiberglass rod that is going to be used to channel it into the cabin. I'm here, I'm going to disconnect this fiberglass rod and I'm going to tie this into the next one. This one is already going into the cabin. So now I'm going to pull it through the rubber grommet that's in the vehicle, and this will take the wire directly into the cabin. Got to be careful here because we don't want to lose our purple wire. I have the wires fished up through the engine bay. We're gonna finish pulling them all the way through, and then we're gonna attach them along the back, run it around to the battery in the fuse box location. I'll start by getting the loose power wire fully ran through. So there are our pressure switch wiring. I'm gonna double check to make sure that's all our extra wiring and nothing's left hanging. So now I'm just gonna take some zip ties and I'm gonna run it across the engine compartment. So in looking for a position to install our relay, I don't feel a necessity to drill any holes to attach it or to attach it directly to any of our hard plastic places. This shroud here has a pin, which I think would be a good spot to install the relay on the underside. We're gonna check to see if that will work, and if so, we'll install it there, and then we'll run our wiring underneath directly into the fuse box and the battery. Let me get a pin so we can try to get that sorted. I'm just going to lift up this pin with the little hook tool. Should allow me to remove it, and I think our relay will fit in there nicely. It locks our relay in place really well. Now I can actually use the pigtail for our relay harness, and we'll start doing our wiring into that now. I'm just going to bring our wiring underneath the overflow tank. Now, our wiring for our pigtail goes like this. The blue and the yellow are going to be going to our power wire that goes to the compressor, and then a direct line to the battery. And then we have our black wire that's going to be our ground for the relay, and our white wire is going to be our signal wire. It's going to tap into one of our yellow wires here, and the other yellow wire is going to go into the fuse box. So we're going to line this up. And I didn't seat it all the way. I'm just getting an estimate for our lengths for our wiring. I'm gonna pull our wires out. Our white and our yellow are gonna be tied together. One red from here can go to either the yellow or the blue, that doesn't matter. And then we can wire everything else up into the fuse box. So to start, I'm just gonna back this up a little bit. We'll start with our yellow wires, at least one of them. I'm gonna go ahead and trim that. And we'll strip it, and we'll do a butt connector to tie in the yellow and the white wires. In our wire pack, I'm just looking for a red butt connector right there. feed it into the connector, give it a tug. I can see visibly that the copper conductor is being pinched. I'll just do the same thing with our white pigtail wire. And I'm giving it a tug to make sure it's secure. So that feels good. I'm done with the yellow wires for now, so I'm gonna go ahead and just tuck all these back into the loom. And we're done with one yellow wire. The next wire we're gonna interface is gonna be our red and our yellow. We'll create our loop somewhere around there. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the wire here. And this one we're gonna save because we have to connect the other end to the positive terminal, the battery. So I'm just gonna trim off our insulation. And for this one, we are going to use a yellow butt connector. Our copper connector is crimped well. Have to make sure we don't get our wires crossed over and about. We can go ahead and finish making this connector. And we are good here. So I'm gonna go ahead and feed that one into the loom just to get it out of the way. Next wire we're gonna work on is the blue wire. That one is going to be the other end of the fuse wire, but we're gonna start on it from the battery side, bring it into the loom, and then we'll hook it all up. So the first thing I'm gonna do is pull out the fuse so that we don't work with any live wires. Next, I'm gonna remove this cover. And we're gonna confirm that these are the positive terminals and that's the negative terminal with the use of our multimeter. We're just gonna put it on DC volts. I just confirmed this is our positive terminals here and this is our negative terminal. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a ring terminal, attach it to the end, and then I can run our fuse to the back. So that's a bit much, a little excess wiring there. So if I attach this fuse here, it's still accessible. It means I can trim this wire down a little bit, install a ring terminal, and attach it right there. So we are gonna get a yellow ring terminal. I'm gonna make sure that fits right inside, and it does. So our terminal is crimped. Now I'm gonna get a socket, unscrew this and attach it. Then I'll zip tie this in position and we'll go from there. So we're gonna go ahead and remove the nut on this terminal. I'm gonna install my ring terminal and we will replace it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and zip tie this in position so it doesn't move on us. Okay. So now we have our wire loom guided. I'm gonna lock that in fully now. So to match all that up, well, I'll give myself a little extra, but we'll take this much off. And now we'll go ahead and crimp these terminals together using a yellow butt connector. Now, let me just reorient my loom. Next step is to attach our relay to a ground. We're gonna extend that wire with our black wire. So unfortunately, the bolt I wanted to use is not grounded, but we'll put it to this bonding strip here. I didn't want to do it, but we'll go ahead and do it. Let's make sure we have a ring terminal that will fit over that. Okay, so that is not going to work because our ring terminal will not fit over it. It'll fit over the main clamp lug, so we'll ground it to here. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna crimp this wire so we can extend our relay ground wire. We're gonna use another red butt connector. I'm gonna just double it over and give it a good tug. So from here, we have one more yellow wire that also is going to be going into the fuse box. So we're gonna channel it all that way. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the zip tie and redo it with the loom going through our main fuse. And that'll secure all these wires from coming undone as we continue to route them. So our loom is gonna terminate right about here. I'm just trimming it so we can fully encapsulate our power wire. Now I will re-anchor this fuse holder to the existing loom. Go ahead and trim off the excess strips of the zip ties. And now we can use our remaining loom to keep the wiring looking clean as we continue running things to the appropriate connections. Our yellow wire is going to go into the fuse box, but you see this fuse box has an environmental seal all the way around it. So we're going to have to modify it in some way, trim off a little edge so that we can get our wire to come inside without getting pinched. What we're looking for here is a switch 12 volt circuit, meaning when the vehicle is turned off, there's no power coming to it. But when you turn the vehicle on, you have a 12 volt signal that you can measure. That's a safety consideration when wiring up our systems, because that allows you to have the compressor only functioning when the vehicle is running, which is important. Should you ever develop a leak in the future, you don't want your compressor to just be running while your vehicle is off. It will drain the battery. And while we're here, let's just go ahead and install our negative terminal. We'll cut this right about there. Let's get our red ring terminal. So that'll be our grounding point for the relay. So I can trim this here. Go ahead and strip it. Bundle the wires together, fold them over for a good bite, and go ahead and feed it through. We'll crimp it, give it a tug. We know we're good. Now let's remove that. That looks like a 10 millimeter. So you see this looses the clamp for the negative battery terminal. We don't want to get anything lost or disconnected. I'm just holding it down with my finger as I reinstall that. I'm just going to lock it in place, and I'm going to go ahead and get a zip tie around that to give it a final seal. So now we have everything wired up except for the trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start testing the system. I'm going to reinstall our relay and just make sure that when I touch this to the positive, we're going to hear the relay click, and we should hear the compressor go on. Okay, so our relay is clicking, but our compressor didn't turn on. So we may have to look at the ground line of our compressor. But we know our relay is working. Now let's find a circuit that we can tap into. So now we're gonna look for a switch 12 volt circuit. It's ideally to do this with two people, but since I am here by myself, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna poke different fuses, and I'm going to check to see if they got 12 volts to them with the multimeter. If they do, I cannot use them. So we'll start here. So that one does not, that one does not, that one does not, that one does. So we cannot use that one, and we cannot use that one. So I have three 10 amp fuses that are good contenders. Now we're going to use an ADA circuit, and we want to make sure that we have enough space for it. This middle fuse seems to give me the best opportunity for installing the ADA circuit without getting anything in the way, and the wire even points in the correct direction. So we're gonna check this fuse with the vehicle on and see if we get 12 volts. Gonna do a quick double check. We get nothing. So let's turn the vehicle on and see if that changes to 12 volts. So I got the vehicle in the on position, and so that one's still not showing any power. And those still are. So let's start the vehicle up and see if that makes a difference. Okay, so we're going to use this one. I've identified this fuse as the one we're going to use. It gives power when the vehicle is running, not when it is on the run position. I'm going to go ahead and pull off the old fuse. I'm going to put it in the bottom slot of our ADA circuit, and then I'm going to reinstall it. Now we can use our yellow wire, and we're going to tie into it right about there. I'm going to give myself a little extra here just for some grace until I can trim out the appropriate groove or notch so that we don't damage our wire when we close the fuse box. So for now, I'm just going to strip it, and we'll fold it over. So I'm going to trim a notch right here so that this wire can nest nicely in the groove. We just want to make sure it's not going to be pinched in any other spots. So that's going to work. I'm going to have this come out through here. We're going to make our notch right there. I'm just going to use my diagonal cutters, trim a little notch. So we trimmed away the plastic. Now our wire can sit inside. Now we're going to test it to make sure that it's not pinched anywhere else. I'm just going to place the cover over it. Okay, so it's locked securely. I'm going to undo it. Okay, you see more where my wire was pinched. So that notch is not deep enough. We got to cut it down more. And we'll do another little test. It's no longer being bound up here, but there's the lower groove. We're going to have to notch that as well. There. No issues with the fitment now. It locks in place. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. So now we adjust our wire, and just for good measure, I'm going to double check that it triggers our relay. So now I will trim it here. We're all wired up. We're going to go take a look at that ground wire on the compressor. So we're installing the horn button onto this vehicle. This was the ideal location for it. I originally wanted to put it here, but I don't think there's going to be enough clearance in the back if the hole was right there. So we're going to offset it and move it up higher. Right about there, I believe that to have a lot more space. So we're going to just confirm by looking in the back and make sure, and then we'll go ahead and drill a hole. So just to make sure we have adequate clearance for our horn button to sit nicely, I was just layering it over. We're gonna go ahead and drill a hole right there. Okay, so we're right on target. We don't want to drill the hole too big. We still got a little ways to go. We need to get to 3/4. We are on our 3/4 from the front, but the back, there's a secondary layer of plastic there that we cannot open up anymore without opening up the front. So we're going to try to get it. We may have to go in there with a rotary tool and clean it out. So I have my purple wire and I got our remaining red wire. I'm just going to go ahead and feed them through our nut that's going to secure our switch from the backside. So with that, I can take these and I'll feed them in for the outside and we'll install them to the switch. So now these are going to connect to the terminals of the switch. It doesn't matter which side you connect to. This red wire, we're going to tap into a positive 12-volt source, and the purple wire, as you know, goes into our horn solenoid. So I'm just going to loosen these and we'll secure them in place. And we will put it in our switch. Now I can go back from the backside and tighten up that nut and we are all set. So that's 12 volts DC, so we'll tap into that wire. So I am going to tap into this orange wire on the OBD2 port. Let me see if I can undo some of this fabric tape. So we're going to use that wire. So I just made a loop in the wire. We're gonna get this in a position where we can route it out of the way, and we'll trim it right there. This is called a military splice. We are going to use this to ensure a good copper to copper connection. We're not going to use any crimp terminals here because we want a solid electrical connection. I'm going to go in with a soldering gun and I'm going to solder that real quick. I'll just get some zip ties. So now that we have our horn switch wired up to a constant 12 volt and our solenoid for the horn grounded, when we push this button, we should hear a click indicating that our electrical is good and that the horn will work once there's air in the tank. So we did a good job.